Good morning. I'm Jesi.
Hi, I'm Andrea.
Welcome to day 188 of GC 365. We're glad you're here. We just celebrated the 4th of July a few days ago, so hopefully the weather's getting nice and summer's well underway, so hopefully you're sticking with us and you're hanging in there. Don't give up on reading your 1 year. You'll be glad that you stuck with it when we get through. Andrea, this is your first time reading through. Tell me what made you want to do this?
Yeah, so I am kind of brand new to faith, and I saw this as an opportunity to kind of be a part of the church, to kind of find my place there. And I guess for the longest time, I really thought that it was one of the situations where, you know, a lot of people will clean the house before the housekeeper comes, or go to the gym, or they'll get fit before they go to the gym. And I thought that I needed to read the Bible and know it all before I came to church. And so I kind of, moved past that eventually, but I saw this as a good way to lay foundation.
That's good. Okay. That's awesome. So we've got a couple passages in the Old Testament.
We do.
Our genealogies.
Yep.
Sometimes we get our assigned reading from Cammie Barker, and I wonder, is Cammie mad at me? I know she gets harassed a lot, so she's not. It's just where we landed. So we have 1 Chronicles 5 to 43 today. And what were your observations?
Yeah.
Did you have any?
Yeah. I just, in looking at it, it reminded me of my family's genealogy. On my dad's side, we had this just, massive book of names. I think it goes back to the 1700s. And
it's very cool.
It's interesting. And, it's a really concrete thing, it's, I think we had talked about this, it lends legitimacy to, the history of this, and cool. All of these people were real people. And so it feels concrete.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So we both noticed that in verse 9, there's a little narrative about a man named Jabez.
Yeah.
What were your observations about him?
So to me, I read this and it resonated with me as a reminder to always turn to God through prayer, and to kind of, just lay it all out there and ask for, whatever it is that you're seeking, and just a reminder that he will fulfill all of our needs.
That's good. I was mentioning there was a book that came out years ago called The Prayer of Jabez, and it says that his name means pain. The Message translation says, "Oh, the pain, a painful birth." And so interesting that his prayer was, he prayed that God would keep him from all trouble and pain. So I wonder, I don't know if his name prompted that prayer, but it is interesting. Yeah. And we talked about, he just asked for what he wanted. Lord, keep me from trouble and pain. It seems like that would be a good prayer that maybe should be obvious, but he actually had the awareness to actually pray it. Right. So very cool.
Rewarded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other observation I have from this chapter in this genealogy is Shimei was interesting to me and stood out as he had 16 sons and daughters. So 22 kids total. That's a classroom. And it says, even though Shimei did his part, his brothers did not have large families. And so therefore Simeon's tribe never grew as large as the tribe of Judah. So I don't know if he harassed his brothers about that, but clearly his family was the biggest. So
yeah, he had his hands full.
So moving into 1 Chronicles 5, we have verses 1 to 17, and we have a little more genealogy. And so Reuben was the firstborn son of Israel, and this isn't great, but he dishonored his father by sleeping with his father's concubines. And so the birthright was given to Joseph. And it said that Reuben isn't listed in the records due to that fact as the firstborn son. So interesting.
Yeah. There's consequences.
Yes. Yeah. In verse 2, we read that the descendants of Judah became the most powerful tribe and provided a ruler for the nation. And so we actually just read, we're a little bit ahead of time here, but we read about the splitting of the tribes into 2 kingdoms in 1 Kings 12. So interesting, just as we see the people of Israel now splitting. So, yeah. So those are my observations. And then we moved into Acts chapter 25 in the New Testament. And so we talked about, we have Festus coming into power as the governor. And again, as with the death of Jesus, we see leading priests and Jewish leaders bringing charges. And we see this with Jesus. We saw it with the stoning of Stephen. And now here they have Paul in their crosshairs. And Paul was actually there, we read, giving approval at Stephen's stoning. And now he's had his conversion. He is now a man of faith, and he's the one with the charges being brought against him.
Yeah.
So what did you see as you're reading this?
I just found that it was really interesting that, kind of as I was reading through this, Festus appeared to be, following the rules and going through the process, being true to the system, which, following the rules. But even with this, it expresses that he knows that Paul is innocent, but he ultimately wants to serve and is serving man, and he wants to win their favor. So his head is obviously in the wrong place.
Yeah. And you were telling me earlier, you were talking about as Paul keeps getting brought before all these people, that the message is going out.
Yeah.
So there's value even in all of this.
Right. Yeah.
And even prior to our chapter, there were crowds of people that he was standing before.
Yeah, I thought it was really great to see God at work in every step of the way during Paul's imprisonment. It seemed like very intentional. He kept creating these platforms, these opportunities for Paul to share the gospel. And first with Felix, then Festus, and then now we see in this chapter that Agrippa also wants to hear his story. And it wasn't just a small gathering. They mentioned that it's this, seems like a very grand gathering with great pomp and with this large group of Gentiles. So it seems like, it was very, very planned.
Yeah. So you have Festus now telling King Agrippa that the accusations made against Paul weren't any of the crimes that he expected. And this is the part that makes me cringe every time. He says, but they have to do with a dead man named Jesus, who Paul insists is alive. And so Festus here gave the most understated description of the Messiah that anybody could give. It's painful to me. And unfortunately, that's what many people today still think. We talked about that. And Jesus referred to this in Matthew 16. When he asked his disciples a question, he said, who do you say that I am? And then he said, who do people say the Son of Man is? And then he asked the disciples, who do you say that I am? And so Festus here says, a dead man named Jesus. And so clearly does not recognize the Messiah.
Right.
But we talked about Paul had no doubt in his mind when he met Christ on the road and he said, who are you, Lord? And the voice said, I'm Jesus. So it's very clear to him. What else did you see when you read this?
I really was struck with verse 11. It just showcased Paul's bravery. He says, if I have done something worthy of death, I don't refuse to die. But if I'm innocent, no one has a right to turn me over to these men to kill me. I appeal to Caesar. But it just showed his confidence and his bravery, and just that he was very assured. It seemed as though his path was very illuminated in front of him, and that he just must have felt the presence of God with him the whole, each step of the way.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah, so Festus is in a predicament, and he asked King Agrippa, what should I write the emperor? There's no clear charge against him, so I'm hoping you can help me out, Agrippa. It makes no sense to send a prisoner to the emperor without specifying the charges against him. So he's in a bit of a predicament, and he's looking for Agrippa to help him out before he sends Paul on to Caesar. So that's where we leave off. And then we move into Psalm chapter 5. And I think I asked you earlier, if you had a particular portion of the reading that was your favorite as we read from the Old and New Testament every day, Psalm and Proverb?
Yeah, I think for me, it just really depends on the day. If I'm, maybe going through a tough time, Psalms generally can, speak to that. There's a lot of broodiness and,
That's true.
There's some heart-wrenching things going on there. Just kind of it depends on what I'm in need of that day.
Sure. That's good. Okay. Yeah. And even speaking to what you're saying right now, verse 1 opens up with, oh Lord, hear me as I pray. Pay attention to my groaning. Kind of exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And so what did you pull from this?
So I really liked verse 8.
Okay.
Lead me in the right path, O Lord, or my enemies will conquer me. Make your way plain for me to follow. And this actually reminded me a lot of our New Testament reading today. It just seems like this is what I was describing. I'm feeling with Paul there, that he seems to be so assured of the steps to take. And that I couldn't ask for, a better prayer like that, for my path to be, illuminated, the path that God wants for me.
That's good.
I feel like it's one of those, overarching prayers that we may forget to pray for, but it just kind of like covers it all, covers all of the bases.
It's really good. I made note in verse 3, it says, listen to my voice in the morning. Each morning I bring my request to you and wait expectantly. Just even referencing the morning as being a time to pray at the top of your day, and then praying with expectation. And who would want to pray? Wouldn't be very motivating if you weren't able to have expectation of the Lord to actually hear and answer your prayers. The Message, sometimes I like looking up a different translation, it gives a little more dimension. And the Message version here says, every morning you'll hear me at it again. Every morning I lay out the pieces of my life on your altar. And that was just interesting picture for me, laying out the pieces of my life. So I thought it was, you referenced verse 8, and it says, lead me in the right path, O Lord, or my enemies will conquer me. And enemies, we talked about in biblical times, could literally be an enemy nation they were coming up against, or sometimes it can be people, in David's case, in his own family, like his father-in-law, Saul, that he was on the run from. And it's interesting because there are others in the Old Testament who also came up where family presented themselves as enemies, unfortunately. We saw Joseph being thrown into the pit by his brothers, whom he later forgave, and then they sold him off to slavery. We saw David's son trying to steal the kingdom from him. And so relational issues can be so hard to navigate, but that prayer that you talked about, lead me in the right path. God can help us when we ask him for help there. And then we talked about verse 11. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, this says, but let all who take refuge in you rejoice. Let them sing joyful praises forever. Spread your protection over them, that all who love your name may be filled with joy. And I mentioned to Jesi that it's just one of those verses that if you just read it over and over again, it's just so comforting. It just feels so nice to read. And
it's good.
Yeah.
I just observed that even in taking refuge, that there may be an issue or something we're dealing with behind that, but you can have joy in that. Let them sing joyful praises. Those who love your name may be filled with joy. So that was reassuring to me also. And verse 12 wraps it up with saying, for you bless the godly, O Lord, you surround them with your shield of love. So that's good. Yeah. It would also be a good nighttime meditation. And we had a short proverb.
Yes.
And you had a good observation about that. You want to share?
Sure. And actually this ties in great with what you were just saying about, relational issues. An offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. Arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars. And to me, this just came as a reminder to kind of be careful with my words, to think before I speak. And if you are able to put forth the effort kind of on the front end of a relationship, then you can save yourself a lot of heartache on the, if, you do offend and there's conflict and possibly a falling out, because then there's a lot of repair work that has to happen there.
That's good. That's really good. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this, and we look forward to seeing you next time.